Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley is at it again, saving America. In addition to thwarting the opportunity for Merrick Garland to sit on the U.S. Supreme Court back in 2016, Chuck Grassley is back, having just identified a huge situation over the ATF with a whistleblower that has identified apparently millions of dollars that have been misspent by the ATF in games and maybe even fraud. Let's break down this story when we come right back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the 4 Box of Don, a proud American gun owner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, and I'm proud to say the top voice of the Second Amendment in America. Thank you, 2025 Gundies Awards. All right, folks, this is a big deal. Chuck Grassley, the Senate Judiciary Committee's chairman, has just written a letter to the acting director of the ATF and to the Attorney General of the United States, Pam Bondi, explaining in detail how a whistleblower has come forward and came forward a few years ago, and all of the claims about ATF malfeasance that he brought forth turned out to be substantiated to the point where he was actually received an honor and a reward, I think even some cash according to this. And yet the ATF continues, so he says, to abuse and mistreat him because they're angry that he engaged in a whistleblowing activity revealing information about certain people allegedly engaged in wrongdoing at the ATF. And Chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, who almost single-handedly, with the support, of course, of Mitch McConnell after Chuck Grassley indicated that he was not going to hold hearings for then Judge Merrick Garland, in 2016, after the death of Justice Scalia, as you may recall, Barack Obama nominated to the Supreme Court Merrick Garland. And Senator Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, said, I'm not going to hold hearings. I'm not going to hold hearings. I'm going to see what the American people have to say about who should be the next president of the United States. And as a consequence, who should be the next Supreme Court justice. And Mitch McConnell went along and agreed with this approach of Senator Chuck Grassley to simply not fill that seat of Justice Scalia's until the American people spoke in November 2016, because prior to that, you had a Republican Senate and a Democrat in the White House, and the 2016 election resolved that issue with Donald Trump in the White House and a Senate majority of Republicans, giving rise to the Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. So needless to say, Senator Chuck Grassley is a great American patriot. So when he writes a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi and the new head, the interim head, the acting director of the ATF, we need to listen carefully as to what he's uncovered and what he's saying. And what he's uncovered and what he's writing about today is really quite shocking, although frankly, for those of us who cover the ATF, it's not really that shocking, even though it kind of is. So here's what Senator Grassley had to write to Attorney General Pam Bondi. My office has received allegations that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has engaged in retaliation against current ATF employee and whistleblower Mr. Aflolabi Siwa Jula. Hope I pronounced that correctly. Mr. Siwa Jula for making legally protected whistleblower disclosures. Those whistleblower disclosures exposed that the ATF had engaged in misconduct by misclassifying, listen carefully, folks, by misclassifying human resources and other administrative positions as law enforcement, as well as other allegations of wrongdoing. As a result of the misconduct, which was substantiated by the Office of Special Counsel of the OSC, ATF law enforcement officers were illegally paid enhanced law enforcement benefits they were not entitled to, wasting millions of taxpayer dollars. Wow. You see what just happened there? So you had a whistleblower, Mr. Siwa Jula, who basically said that there were employees at the ATF who were mischaracterized as law enforcement agents. And I presume that by being a law enforcement agent at the ATF, you got better benefits. You got more money. You got maybe better retirement package, better pension, maybe better health care, maybe a fancier office. I don't know. But obviously, these people were getting paid and were promoted improperly according to this whistleblower. And it turns out this whistleblower has been abused, so it's alleged, by his peers at the ATF for whistleblowing. So, of course, the first question you may ask is, did this whistleblower actually succeed? Did he actually identify wrongdoing? Well, it turns out, apparently he did, because the United States Office of the Special Counsel literally said everything he said was correct. And we are going to give him basically a commendation, an award, a certificate for coming forth and saving Americans millions of dollars. We applaud him. This is what the Office of Special Counsel had to say in awarding Mr. Siwa Jula an award for accurately identifying the malfeasance within the ATF. In a letter from Henry Kerner from the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, this is what they had to say about Mr. Siwa Jula, the whistleblower. Quote, as a human resources professional at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF or the agency, you were instrumental in bringing to light ATF's longstanding and illegal practice of deliberately misclassifying upper-level law enforcement positions to put unqualified individuals in those positions at significant taxpayer expense. You persisted in raising these concerns to agency management despite the entrenched culture at the agency of disregarding civil service rules and regulations and the negative consequences of such disregard to non-law enforcement employees. Because you courageously disclosed these wrongful practices, the U.S. Office of the Special Counsel directed the ATF to investigate your allegations, which were substantiated. Do you hear that, folks? The allegations were substantiated. As a result, the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, that's the OPM, suspended ATF's authority to classify certain positions until ATF addresses the misclassification issues to OPM's satisfaction. And then it goes on to talk about the award given to Mr. Siwa Jula. Now, what's crazy, of course, but again, in some ways not crazy, this kind of malfeasance occurred during the Joe Biden years. I'm sure you're shocked to hear that this occurred during the Biden administration. And I want to remind you of something very important in terms of salaries, benefits, and government employee unions. Did you know in the 1930s that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president, opposed unions made up of government employees? You heard what I just said? FDR did not oppose labor unions of private employees negotiating with private employers, because in those negotiations between the employees of a company and the management of the company, they could be disagreements about who gets paid what, right? So you got the employees fighting to make more money with better conditions, and you got management presumably trying to keep costs down to give rise to more profits. That is tension. That's how the marketplace works. But the reason why I bring this up is to compare and contrast that with the reason why President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who's no friend of the Second Amendment, no friend of America in my view, he is not a good president, but that's just my view. We can talk about that in a separate video. But President Franklin Delano Roosevelt opposed the existence of government employee unions. And why did FDR oppose government employee unions but not private sector unions? And we know why. The same thing that perhaps happened here with the ATF during the Biden years. And that is, if you have government employees in management negotiating with government employees not in management, you have government employees negotiating with government employees about whether or not they should increase the pay and improve the working conditions of government employees. See the problem? There's no other side to the negotiation when you've got government employees negotiating with government employees. They're all on the same economic side, which is to take money from the American taxpayer and fleece us to make their lives richer and their working conditions better, and on and on and on. There's no other side of the negotiation. There's no one representing the taxpayer here. So when you have a whistleblower in this situation who's flagging that the internal policies of the ATF were playing these games to elevate people to positions to which they were not entitled to make more moolah, that's no good. And the Office of Special Counsel indeed confirmed the allegations. But then they turned around and they punished this whistleblower. The ATF punished this whistleblower. Hopefully they didn't kill his dog. I don't think that happened. So in that sense, the whistleblower here lucked out compared to other victims of the ATF misbehavior. Nevertheless, this is what he had to say in describing his working conditions at the ATF once he revealed the malfeasance that was occurring within that rogue agency. According to Senator Grassley, Mr. Siwa Jula told my investigative staff that the isolation, threats of harm, and sustained retaliation mentioned above in this letter have taken a significant toll on him and his family. Mr. Siwa Jula told my office that as an U.S. Army veteran, his experience working at the ATF after becoming a whistleblower during the Biden administration is on the same level and some days worse than his experience serving in Baghdad, Iraq. Mr. Siwa Jula told my staff, that's Chuck Grassley's staff, that when serving in Iraq, he could trust that his Army squad mates and leadership would have his back. But the Biden ATF leadership had instead put a target on his. So that's just crazy stuff. Crazy stuff, but not shocking because the ATF has been a rogue agency for some time. And they always screw stuff up. It's just the way it is. I know they're working hard trying to get it fixed as much as you can fix it. I know there's a real debate as to whether or not you should get rid of the ATF. You know, my view is that the ATF should simply function as a civil administrative agency on par with the FDA and the EPA and the like. They just should have civil powers to sort of do basic regulatory work with the gun industry and process NFA applications, things like that. That's all they should do. That's all they should do. They should have no law enforcement agents at ATF. As far as I'm concerned, everybody that's a law enforcement agent at ATF should be moved over and required to engage in immigration enforcement. If they don't like that job, that's fine. They can quit and go work in the private sector, wherever they want to go. But that's my view, that the ATF should, again, be shrunk down dramatically and do nothing more than process things like applications to become an FFL or to get your NFA tax stamp approved, whatever it is. But they really should be a civilian administrative agency and no more. There should not be any law enforcement authority there. And if, again, like any other American, if they see a crime, they can pick up the phone and call it the police, like I can, like you can. But they should not have the authority to engage in law enforcement activities directly. They should simply be civilian administrative agents, unelected bureaucrats in a sense, and nothing more than that. And again, if they see a crime, they can call up the FBI, but they themselves should not be engaged in law enforcement. That's just my view. All right, folks, so there you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's episode. Make sure you check out the whole letter from Senator Chuck Grassley in the description of this video below. Don't forget to subscribe to YouTube and to Rumble and like this video. And I look forward to talking again real soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.